Welcome to Start PT Now podcast, and joining us today is
Franco Ortuno. I'm a trainer here at the Aspen Hill Club. Personal trainer. I've been training here just under a year, and I'm excited to be on the show today. Thank you guys for having me.
well, thank you, Franco. Thank you for joining us. And today we have a few things we want to know about the personal training world. And right, guys, start us off.
Yeah, that's right. An awesome side note as well. Franco goes back. He has a history with physical therapy, sports medicine center, a good friend of the company, and especially of our owner, Sasan Chalzamini. So just want to thank him again for his involvement. And we're excited to sort of hop into some questions, pick his brain about personal training. And we're especially interested with, being in the physical therapy, health, fitness, wellness space. There's a lot of overlap that comes with that.
Oh yeah.
And so I think just starting off, I wanted to ask, when you're tailoring a fitness program for clients, how
hmm
important is having that history of like injuries or chronic pain for them as far as creating a plan going forward?
Very, very important. So, for example, every time I'm starting off a consultation with my client, first thing first, I always get to know the basics. Get to know their activity level, how long they've been active, what kind of form of activity like they like to engage in. But just like you mentioned, very important thing is their history, their injury history. For me, one thing I always have to know is, all right, what should I stay away from with you, or what can I strengthen you? How can I help you get stronger? And for me, that means talking to my patients. Let's say they had a lower back injury, right, or a hip injury. So I'm gonna have to know straight off the bat. Okay, knowing that maybe I shouldn't do too much stuff that involves a lot of hip rotation or a lot of lower back movement. Now that doesn't mean shy away from it because we have to strengthen those areas, right? But there's ways to work around it. And it's always very, very important for me off the bat to know, about those previous medical histories, injuries, all that stuff.
So let me ask you on that note, are your clients open to giving you that information, or are they trying to hide it in order to perform a little better during their training? Do they confuse being completely physically injury free in order to maximize training with you, or do you have to kind of like force them to tell you what's going wrong with them?
It's honestly really 50-50 because there's some patients, some of my clients that will say, they'll tell me exactly how they're feeling with what we're doing and everything, whether certain movements might be triggering pain, or other clients that kind of stay quiet and they don't want to say anything because, it might ruin their self esteem, or they just want to feel strong and they want to get through the workout. So whether they're feeling pain or not, they might not say anything. Me as a trainer, I always like to be very engaging with my clients. So I'm always talking a lot to them and I'm always asking them a lot. Many times I'm like, hey, how's this feeling? How are you feeling? Do you want to increase the weight? Shall we keep it the same? Um, but yeah, I mean, it really comes down to the client. Some of them like to tell you when they feel pain. Some of them won't tell you. But as a trainer, you can kind of see it and you can kind of notice it in their movement patterns when we're doing certain movements, if they're doing it the right way, or if certain body parts are compensating. And that kind of will tell me. I'll step in and I'll kind of ask, dig deeper. Most of the time, they will tell me. But like I was saying, 50% of the time, like they'll tell me straight off the bat, or sometimes they'll just hide it.
I'm sure there are those like little cues you can pick up. If they don't tell you explicitly, I'm sure there's sort of like a few things that you've sort of gotten more and more like familiarity with as far as seeing, how people move or what certain movements look like that could
Yeah.
indicate some sort of limitation. I was wondering, as far as going through those steps, are there any specific tests or measures you take to sort of like test out those limitations or movement patterns?
So yeah, when we're doing our consultations, there's three movement patterns that we'll do: squatting, benching, and deadlifting, right? And there's certain cues to look for in those movement patterns. For example, when we're looking at a squat, is the hip shifting? Are the shoulders giving out? Is one shoulder kind of dropping more than the other? Are there's a lot of cues that we look for, and there's kind of the indicators that tell us, okay, this is what's going on. This is how we can work from here, fix that.
On that note, have you ever experienced any personal injuries yourself where you've used your own training methods to kind of get yourself back into a functioning baseline again?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that. Actually, I've been serious injuries that I've had. Only one, which was a shoulder injury. And based off of everything that I learned at my time at PTSMC, I was able to basically rehab myself back into full health. And then actually, I had a more recent injury playing soccer. It was at the beginning of this year, back in April, March. And my knee, I really messed up my knee pretty badly. I couldn't walk for a few days. I had to be in bed. But me knowing, okay, I have to rest my body. I have to ice it. I have to still move it a little bit, not let it get stiff. But no, thank you to my time at PTSMC. I learned a lot about rehabilitation, and all those all the things I learned, I was kind of able to incorporate into my own training. And biggest thing that I learned from that was just taking more time to do certain warm-ups, depending on what I'm working on that day, certain warm-ups that are specific to what I'm doing that day. So it could be, for example, doing things that are really going to activate those muscles I'm going to be using. One thing that I love to do, not only with myself, but with my clients, is IYTs, which is in the PT world, you know, we all know this one. We love it.
In your
Bye bye.
experience with going through physical therapy yourself, you were able to take that education, apply it later to a different injury, and kind of combine with your training, get back on your feet and get stronger again.
Yeah, and I think it's a really great point, sort of that collaboration that can happen and how effective that can be when you're talking personal training and physical therapy. Because, ideally you want those things to work together. You want as someone who's into fitness or someone who's exercising on the move, you want to prevent injuries, you want to take the right measures to prevent those injuries or, work through whatever you might be dealing with, but then also continuing your training to a way that's effective, building muscle or achieving whatever your fitness goals are. And I thought that was really interesting, your background with physical therapy and even working with PTMSC, kind of being able to incorporate some of those ideas into what you're doing as a personal trainer. You got into a couple of ones like that, specifically that exercise you mentioned for the shoulder. I was wondering, are there any like principles or ideas that you incorporate in your training sessions to prevent injuries, as far as relating to physical therapy?
Of course, of course. For me, one thing that every time when it comes to training, a lot of people, so they're stretching, right? The whole topic is stretching. Are we doing dynamic stretches? Are we doing static stretches? And I feel like there's this confusion. People don't know whether they should be doing static stretching or dynamic stretching. Some people may not even know what that means. For those
What
that
are
don't
the
know,
differences between the two, really quick?
static stretching could be just mainly any stretch that you're holding still. So, for example, it could be me holding my arm right here, stretching my shoulder, not moving it. Now, a dynamic stretch would be opening and closing that shoulder, just like this. For me,
So stationary versus active.
exactly,
Got it.
exactly. Most simplest way to put it, stationary versus active. I always like to do dynamic warm ups before my workout. That kind of for me, the idea behind it is basically it's just priming up my body for whatever I'm going to be doing like that day, like I mentioned earlier. For example, I'll kind of walk you through what I do. If I'm doing upper body, right? For example, prime example yesterday, I like to do IYTs. I'll do some external rotations, and then I do some face pulls. Those are typically my three go-tos when I'm warming up for upper body.
And we're being joined today by Franco Ortuno over at Aspen Hill Tennis Club, personal trainer there. Now, Franco, on the shoulder part, notice this year in baseball we had a lot of pitchers go out. Tommy John, are these exercises kind of to help strengthen that motion as well?
These exercises are mainly to strengthen those internal, external rotators of the shoulder, which are external rotation, internal rotation. A movement you do a lot, especially as a baseball player, either when you're catching a ball, when you're throwing a ball, right? Now, on that topic, and I was actually having this conversation with a friend yesterday. When it comes to sports and especially injuries, I feel like a lot of the times, the strength coaches take all the blame, and it sucks because sometimes, you could be having a really good season, you could be really fit, and the people will be like, oh, the strength coaches are doing an amazing job. And then sometimes you might be getting injured a lot. You might be very unfit. And then who takes the blame? Again, typically a lot of times it's a strength coach. And for me, being someone who worked with strength coaches, they're mentioning this all the time. And it's kind of hard, Sometimes you see what's working well and you kind of think, oh, you know what, this is working well. How can I make it even better? But sometimes adding a lot more things, whether it's more exercises, increasing the volume or increasing the intensity, sometimes it doesn't help. Sometimes, the saying goes, sometimes more is less, sometimes less is more. But yes, back to your question, Leo, like I said, those are going to be a lot of exercises that are going to help you build healthy shoulders.
And I know a big strain, especially when it comes to a sport of baseball, is how active you are. How much of that motion you have to do, how strenuous it is, tedious time and time again. And so the topic of rest and recovery comes up a lot and sort of like rotating around players. I was wondering what your philosophy on rest and recovery was, maybe even especially for clients who are balancing that fitness training they're doing with like physical therapy or something along those lines.
I want to touch on that topic, how you just mentioned about how rotating players and all that. Right now in soccer is a big thing that we're seeing. And I don't know about other sports, but I know soccer right now, there's been a lot of competitions this year. So a lot of these players don't have much time to rest and recover in between games. They only have maybe a few days, maybe 2 or 3 days. And now you see so many players getting injured. And it's for that reason, because they're not having enough time. In my opinion, they're not having enough time to take proper care of their body after all that strenuous effort that they're putting in. And yes, back to, physical therapy and training, whether you're doing both. I think that if you're doing both, I think physical therapy is amazing. And I think it's more so also it helps you with recovery a lot also. I don't think it hurts to be doing PT one day, training the next day, PT one day, training the next day. Now, of course, that doesn't mean maybe take a day where you're giving your body some time to recover and not really put too much strenuous effort on it. But yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Well, too, I imagine your communication with the medical team of your client is important. And is that something that shows your client that you're taking that extra level of communication to show trust so you can get more out of them? Because I can imagine you get someone who comes in and says, "Oh, I went to the doctor. He says I can only do X amount." And then you work with the client and you realize X amount is just a very low baseline. They could do more. Do you then communicate with the physician or their therapist in order for them to be aware of the rehab process?
Oh, for sure. For sure. Just like we're mentioning about the talk between personal trainers and physical therapists, right? I think it's very important. Like, let's say I have a client, right, who's coming to me and they just want to get strong overall, but they're coming back. Let's say they're recovering from a shoulder injury. For me, as a personal trainer, I think it's going to be very important for me have that communication with their physical therapist. Be like, hey, where did you kind of leave off with your patient, or what are some movements that they've been very good at? What are some movements that they're not really good at? How can we kind of make them stronger in these areas, those areas? So yes, it is very important as a personal trainer to be having that communication with that medical professional.
Definitely. And I'm sure, the client certainly has got to appreciate that sort of level of communication, that dedication to care as well. But I'm sure there's a lot of key benefits for you as well, having that sort of communication with other professionals or, people like, MDs or physical therapists. I was wondering from your perspective, what are like the key benefits of collaborating with someone like a physical therapist as far as getting the best patient outcome, best outcome for the people that you're training?
I think one big benefit is, I'm learning a lot more also from these physical therapists, because whether it doesn't matter which medical professional it is, I'm always learning so much more. And as a personal trainer, you should always be, no matter what profession you're on, I feel like you should always be taking the time to learn more and more, expand your mindset, expand your knowledge on that, whatever your craft is. For me, that's personal training. And for me, how can I learn more? It could be through working with physical therapists who know more than me. It could be working with orthopedics who know a lot more than me. Um, just like that, kind of taking that step to go above and beyond to provide the best care to my clients.
Now, with your experience working with these medical professionals, especially when your client is really engaging and wants to see their outcomes advance, what have you learned about the human body, or what part of the body have you learned the most about through this experience?
Honestly, I'm still learning. I'm still learning myself. So it'd be hard to pick just one.
What's your
Uh,
favorite body part to work on then?
my favorite body part to work on, I would say, are my legs.
See, every trainer's legs, chest, or back.
Legs.
Never the
I didn't want to
biceps.
say chest or back, because those are the number two. The top two.
Yes.
I like to do legs.
Okay. And big fundamental reason why the legs?
Not necessarily a big fundamental reason, but for me, I've always played soccer, and it's
Okay.
always been very important for me to have healthy legs, mobile legs. Um, but I think to expand more upon that, you know, over time, especially as we get older, a lot of times we get weaker and we can't really, sometimes that impairs our walking, sometimes we can't run. So I think it's always very important to be on our feet as much as we can because, you know, as a human, we're made to walk. We're not made to be sitting down or sitting down for extended periods of time. I think it's very important that we're always on our feet.
Like you're talking about your background in soccer. Me being a soccer player myself, I know how important those legs can be. And I think, when you do have that sort of like that history or like almost like a deep-rooted interest in that certain area, it inspires you more and more to learn more about those topics and to get more invested and sort of apply those things in what you do. And I think that was a big part of like what sort of got me into the space, especially with like marketing. Growing up, background being online, marketing, making silly YouTube videos when I was younger, right? Whatever it may be. So I kind of reeling that back around, I wanted to ask you, what was it that got you into personal training? Can you point to any specific moments or experiences that sort of inspired you or put you in this pursuit of knowledge?
Yeah, so for me, it all started me getting into the gym and all that. It really started back 5 years ago, back in 2019, right before COVID. And this was me, 2018. I was going into college and I wasn't really sure what I wanted to study. So, like I said, Saman is one of my really good friends who happens to be the son of Sasan and Dr. Sahela, the owners. Much love to them. I always looked up to his parents, being around him and them a lot. I was kind of like, you know what? I don't really know what I'm going to study. What can I go into? So, seeing what they did, seeing what Dr. Sahela did, I was like, okay, for me, I really like medicine and I really like working with athletes. How can I take those two together? So I was like, you know what? Maybe physical therapy could be a possible route to go. So I started going. I started my I did my associates at MC in exercise science, and then I transferred to the University of Maryland, and I finished my bachelor's in kinesiology. So there, I was kind of on the route to do physical therapy, but then I kind of like started really thinking about it, and physical therapy, I love it, but for me, it was more so I want to work with athletes. How can I be working with athletes on a day-to-day basis, or how can I just help someone get better if it's not through physical therapy? So I found that it's through personal training. I did an internship also at the University of Maryland, and over there, I was working with athletes. I was working with the soccer team, the wrestling team, gymnastics, track and field, and I really, really grew a big love for just training athletes and how athletes train in particular, because it's not the same as your typical bodybuilder or CrossFit. Yeah, I really realized, you know what? In terms of starting off my career, I'm going to start off personal training, and then maybe I'll go into strength and conditioning. And then maybe if I want to go back to school, I can go back to school and do my DPT and take that physical therapy route if I truly feel like that's where I want to go.
Well, that's awesome, man. Well, it sounds like you found a really great niche. It relates, so heavily with the areas you're interested in, your background in sports and soccer. And it's really cool too to see that sort of link between even PTMSC and sort of learning about the physical therapy and health and sort of fitness space through that connection as well. So it sounds like you're doing some great stuff, learning a lot, obviously young in your career. And a lot of place to grow, whichever way you want to take that. So, all in all, really think this was a great like bit of information here. I think Leo's got one more question for you, and then I think we can call it a successful first run, and get some more on the calendar going forward.
Awesome. Sounds
Absolutely. Before
amazing.
we let you go, we're being joined by Franco Ortuno over at Aspen Hill Tennis Club, personal trainer extraordinaire, because that's what we're going to name you. Now, Franco, before we let you go, I have one major question I want to know.
Yes, of course.
Your favorite food to eat after a workout?
Ooh, I would say Greek yogurt with granola, honey, and blueberries, or just any fruit. If it's not that, what I'll eat is just a lot of protein. So like steak. Um, I'll pair that with some rice. So typically, when it comes to post workout, I'm definitely gonna have a heavier meal as opposed to a pre-workout.